Lawyers of Reddit, what is a detail that your client failed to bring up to you that completely lost you the case? Opposing counsel, isn't it true you hit victim in the face with a brick? Client, no, Marcus hit him with a brick. I hit him in the back with a piece of wood. He'd sent a photo of his wife's beaten face to his wife with a message saying something along the lines of this: "Do you want this to happen again?" He came across very well and caught up to that point, but his mask slipped when that came out. Lawyer in the UK, I acted for a member of a famous paedophile hunting group. My client was charged with various offences relating to his vigilantism, most seriously, causing grievous bodily harm with intent. He wanted me to fight the case on a public interest defense point that is not available to him in statute or at common law, contrary to my advice. I followed his instructions as I'm bound to do. If the state won't punish pedophiles properly, then it's left to men like my client to take the law into their own hands. A horse argument for a whole host of reasons. His laptop was seized by police and submitted for forensic examination. He had a staggeringly huge database of child pornography on it. He himself was a massive pedo. Friend of mine is a defense attorney. He was representing a guy with a lengthy record for assault. Basically, this guy took an AC unit and threw it at his girlfriend. My buddy tells me he was able to get a plea deal for 1 year probation, no jail time. The judge is all ready to accept the deal when he asks the defendant if he had anything he would like to say. The defendant responds, "Yeah, I don't know why they charging me with assault. I never touched her. I just threw an AC at her. This is bullsh." Judge rescinded plea deal because of defendant's attitude, lack of remorse. Went to trial and got a year in jail. The idea of having an AC unit thrown at me is honestly terrifying. That he filmed his offenses for his YouTube channel. The cops didn't even know. A witness brought it up on day 3 of the trial. It was a nice quick change of plea that afternoon. So you're saying, it's just a prank? Bro, isn't a valid legal defense, not since Prankster v. Bro in 1986. What kind of crime was it? I want to know what the YouTube channel is. LMAO. Case as a paralegal. Negligence case. Client argued that a lack of street lights and a cyclist he couldn't see was responsible for him hitting a wire pole. Upon discovery, the first respondent's report indicated that they found the driver in the driver's seat, pants down, with porn playing on the phone. Wasn't difficult to figure out who was negligent at that point, Your Honor. If the cable repairman had simply fixed the cable in accordance with professional standard practices, my client would have had no other recourse but to keep his ostrich in the corral on the evening in question. Guy in prison hired me to request a modification of his sentence because he was doing very well, completing a lot of optional programs, no rule violations, etc. He had his family come in and pay and everything to get started. I asked the family and the client if he had requested modification before, because the law said that for his conviction, he could only request modification twice for any one sentence, regardless of if they were granted or denied. Swore up and down he'd never filed before. You can see where this is going. After spending a few hours going over records and preparing documents, a copy of the CCS, the case record basically, finally arrived. He'd personally filed for modification 6 times since he was sentenced with handwritten pleadings that were all denied. So the one he hired me for was a waste of time and would never be considered at all. I'm a court-appointed attorney for qualifying individuals in family matters. Termination of parental rights case. Have been fighting to argue that parent is stable, working lawfully, has a suitable apartment, doesn't need psychotropic meds anymore, ready to be a parent, etc. After a few months of negotiating with all the parties and Department of Children, Court Services, we have a pre-trial to try and convince guardians. I meet with my client before the hearing to see if anything changed. Nope. All good. Let's get my kids. Great. That's not happening today, but let's try. We get going in court. My client, who is super hot-headed and quick to anger, gets riled up and goes off on the guardians, screaming in open court. It doesn't end there, but reveals 1. That no longer is working. 2. No longer in apartment. 3. Doesn't want to have a relationship with guardians despite her kids loving them. 4. Won't send her kids pictures of the toys they miss and can't have. 5. Plans on moving out of state. 6. Thinks they can live as a family off of state aid when she gets them back, and is 4 months pregnant. All in the matter of 15 seconds. I was too shocked to even react. Speechless. Not the image of stability and parental fitness I've been trying to paint since last July. We became a foster family about a year ago. We've had several short-term placements since then, and I always go to the hearings because that's when you can truly find out what's going on. Kid is put into care with all kinds of injuries that parent can't explain, but they all seem to happen when they are at work and the kid is left at home with family. It was very clear that the kiddo was being abused and neglected during these times, and their romantic partner was the only one there when these injuries were happening. Parent comes to court and lets us know that they've broken up with that person and we can give them their kid back now. Judge asks when they broke up and parent replies, "Just now before we walked in so I can get my kid back." Abusive person sitting next to them, drove them there, still living together, etc. Judge wasn't buying it. Not my client, but the son of the opposing party, and presumably the party himself, lied about being blind to make himself seem more sympathetic as a witness. We didn't know either until he took the witness box. Their counsel asked him to take the oath, and he picked the card up and read it. That was the cherry on top of a series of ridiculous events. The judge dismissed the whole thing in our client's favor shortly after. I was a trainee at the time, but my boss, who was in her late 60s then, said it was the most ridiculous case she'd ever handled, and he picked the card up and read it. I was expecting he easily walked up or sat down, not that he was stupid enough to actually read something out. I'm a public defender in an area with lots of meth use. Meth makes most people talk a lot. So I can't tell you how many clients forget to mention that they got to the jail still high and called their mom girlfriend buddy on the recorded jail phone and not only confessed to the crime, but also brainstormed whatever alibi or version of events I'm relying on to defend them. I was in court once for a school journalism project, and there was a woman in court who had been arrested for weed and crack possession when she came to bail out her boyfriend from a separate arrest. Apparently he called her from jail and told her to come bail her out and to bring some weed and crack. The guard overheard him and it was recorded on the jail phone, so they arrested her when she showed up. Credit card theft fraud case. When I was a young lawyer back in the late 80s, I was trying this guy on a CC case and the witness was the department store clerk. Before video surveillance, the state relied heavily on witness identification. As she described the customer that was purchasing the very unique clothing her store sold, I asked her how could she be so sure it was my client. She looked at my client, who was wearing the most obnoxiously yellow shirt imaginable, and said, because not only does he completely match the description I just gave you, but he's wearing the exact same shirt I sold him. The jury convicted him and I learned that day to better prepare my clients for trial. I am actually a lawyer, but I was only watching this trial, not participating. So the case was that woman A had hit woman B in the head with a heavy beer pint at a bar, and woman B got pretty serious injuries. The defense claimed that woman A had not hit anyone with the pint, but instead had just thrown the pint into a random direction, and it happened to hit B in the head. Thus it was an accident and not a battery. Well, the prosecution had a CCTV tape from the bar, and it was shown at the trial. And the tape clearly showed in HD as A walked behind B and smashed the pint to her head so hard that the pint shattered on impact. I looked at the defense lawyer and his jaw literally almost hit the table. The prosecutor also noticed this and asked something along thrown A, and the defense lawyer said that due to technical difficulties he couldn't get the CCTV tape open on his computer when he was reviewing the evidence. Woman A was found guilty. So yeah, I was completely dumbfounded. I can't get the file to play. What is it? Video of the incident. Oh, it'll show you didn't do it, right? Yeah, great. Next file please. Man, this lawyer gig is EZ. Lost due to the incompetence of the lawyer, not at client's fault. I mean, the client was also at fault here. My father is a judge. I remember him talking about a case where a woman was suing for a severe back injury that she said was preventing her from working and taking care of her kids and so on. In the middle of the trial, a pen rolled off the table and she is bending over trying to reach it from her chair, but pen was too far away. So she stands up and bends over and picks it up and goes back to her seat as if nothing is out of the ordinary. My dad is just looking at her and she snaps at my dad and goes, "What are you staring at?" My dad asked her if she was okay and her response was that she was fine. Her attorney leaned over and said something to her and she then loudly started complaining about her back and how much her back hurt, but no one believed her. Lol. This one ended my marriage. Well, it was the start of the end of marriage. My husband lost his job in the title mortgage business, applied for unemployment, got denied. I decide to help him with his appeal hearing. I asked him multiple times before the hearing, is there anything you did that caused them fire you? He says no, absolutely not, they fired him out of nowhere. Hearing day comes. He testifies under oath that he did nothing wrong, was a good employee, no issues. Upon cross-examination, the other attorney pulls out documents from one of his real estate closings, documents he forged and backdated. Had to admit he perjured himself. Needless to say, he didn't get unemployment and he didn't sleep at home that night. Damn. That's rough. It's one thing to lie to a stranger, but to your spouse when they are supporting you? A friend of mine was married to some kind of technician. He worked, among other things, installing and repairing elevators. One day one of the customers sues him for destroying an elevator, and the husband denies having anything to do. My friend is enraged and, together with the husband's lawyer, goes over all the evidence and the documents to prepare a rock-solid defense. And suddenly, my friend realizes that a lot of things don't add up. She asks her husband, please, be honest with me, did you do it? Several times, which always causes the husband to explode at her and accuse her of being a bad wife. And then, a couple days before the beginning of the trial, he comes to her hanging his head low and admits that it was him. The customer ended the maintenance contract, and in retaliation this guy showed up with a hammer outside business hours and trashed the elevator. My friend was livid. If they didn't have children she would have divorced him. Now you put it that way, maybe I did hit the car. Simple is good. Not me, but my mentor. This is the reason you never ask questions that you don't already know the answer to in court. During the trial with the judge on a divorce matter, the wife brought up that he had abused her during the course of their marriage. Client whispers to my mentor that that is absolutely not true. On the stand, during his portion of testimony, my mentor asks, at any point in the marriage, did you lay your hands on your wife? One time we were having an argument and I held her down on the couch until she stopped arguing with me. What? My mentor said it was like she could see it happening in slow motion and all the alarm bells were going off in her head because he had never mentioned this and, apparently, to him, this was not abuse. The judge gave wife a lot more money as a result and husband was baffled. My mentor was fuming. Eater. Husband admitted this was the only time he had laid hands on wife. My mentor was more peeved because she had thought the case was in the bag since wife had abandoned the kids with husband to run off with her lover down in Florida and literally only came back to the state to get the divorce done. Husband had been noted as being a great dad to the kids and a good figure in the community, hence why she was so damn shocked at his answer. But your honor, I wasn't using my hands. I was approached by this attorney to work for him for free to go after smugglers. This guy had been arrested for dumping goods onto American markets that violated trade agreements. In his arrest, a bunch of goods were left in warehouses to rot, and their owners, his clients, were never paid. This attorney showed me that this smuggler had assets, and that he had gone to the criminal trial and gotten the judge to set aside $2 million of the criminal penalties to settle his client's debts. He had receipts, invoices, all of the paperwork. He just needed associates to help him take the case to trial. He wanted me to work for free, but he would pay me on contingency once he obtained the verdict. He had 2 other attorneys working for him with the same deal. I worked on the case for a short while, but luckily moved on to other things. The other 2 attorneys worked on that case for over 2 years. At one point, they negotiated a $1.5 million settlement of all claims. The attorney in charge rejected the offer, because he was convinced he could get twice as much at trial. In the end, the case settled for $200K, because none of the clients would enter the United States to testify, for fear of being arrested. The 2 associates got $8K apiece for 2 years of work. I'm still a law student and this happened during my first internship at a court. A girl among other people was charged with drug possession, but because she had thrown away the drugs and the police couldn't prove that she bought or owned the drugs, BC it could have been one of the other people as well who still had drugs on them. The judge ruled in dubio pro reo. He then asked if she wants to say add something and this girl asked if she can get her drugs back. The defense attorney looked like he was about to get a heart attack. I really don't want to believe anyone is that stupid. Sadly yes, I've heard of people calling the police for getting ripped off in their meth purchase. This is by far the stupidest one on here, I think. She did something wrong, got away with it, and then FED it up. Employment law matter. He claimed to have been unfairly dismissed over bogus performance management. The real reason, he organized via Craigslist to have someone collect a box of his cum from a children's playground. There were explicit messages from him asking what they did with it, and whether they rubbed it all over themselves. The employer provided us the messages. Jesus, if you're going to be a creep, don't do it on company time equipment. WTF is wrong with people? What is wrong with people? Broadly gestures at cum box. FDA dismissed a guy for insider trading. He would access a database of drugs about to be approved, which nearly always caused stock to go up. He'd made millions buying stock in his family's name to cover his tracks, but he made a fatal mistake. He looked at the database and then bought stock with his work computer, which FDA owned and could search without consent. You click a statement to that effect each time you sign on. If he'd waited and done it on his own computer, they'd have had to get a search warrant, a much tougher proposition. I was actually on a jury. Guy was suing a business, said he got injured, couldn't work for 3 years. Defense counsel: sir, isn't it true that you spent 18 of those months in prison for armed robbery? Not mine, but went to court over a ticket. Lady was in front of me for DUI and hit and run. The judge assigns a lawyer for her since she was so shook she quit her job. The judge asked the prosecuting attorney for details on the case. She legit says, "You mean that car I hit while I was intoxicated?" The judge stops, takes his glasses off and says, "Everything is recorded in this courtroom. I told you not to talk to anyone about your case except the attorney that I assigned for you." You could tell he was ready to walk out of the room with the level of stupidity this lady showed. UK, not a lawyer as such, but a planning consultant. Client signed sworn affidavit stating he'd been running a truck park business for over 10 years on a piece of land. After 10 years, a use becomes immune from legal action. The counsel checked Google Maps